As an artist who's been sharing my work online, one of the most frequent questions I get asked is, how do you choose your colors? The truth is, learning color theory is the only real way to know what colors to use, but that's not really something I can teach in a single video. Even then, it's a lot of trial and error. I figured the next best thing would be to help answer specific questions during stream, and break down my process in a way that might help everyone understand the relationships between color a little better. Today specifically, we'll be focusing on value. When people think of value and contrast, a lot of the time they think of the line work, and that's a good place to start because your line work and like your darks and lights do determine how visible something is going to be. But importantly too, the colors that you choose have value themselves. Just to exemplify this, if we were to take this drawing of Critter and we were to turn it grayscale, you can see that all of the colors that I've chosen have pretty distinct values from each other, so that it's not impossible to see where the segments of color end. I would say that the only exception to this rule is this hanky right here, which is pretty similar to the orange. That's why there's this cream section that separates those big chunks so that the values don't all blend together and become impossible to see. The way that values relate to each other will make your art like more cohesive, like it'll make it feel more harmonious, and the darks and lights of your pieces will make things look visible versus like them more difficult to read. This is another spot I'm actually going to change their colors because the original pink that was used I don't think shows the contrast enough between the fur. Yeah, so if you can see, if we take the hue and we make everything grayscale, you can still tell the shapes apart from each other, especially around the eye region. This outline on the outside and the character kind of like fades into the background here. My lines are still black, which is why everything is still pretty easy to tell apart, but I'm gonna try and take it so that the values of the character just kind of like pop a little more. Now, I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the line work to this purple, but I'm going to change all of the line work to this purple, because I think that that being the darkest color will show us what direction we want to go. I'm even going to take and bring it more into like a warm value. I think it looks good around the bows, but where it's getting lost, for me personally, is the fur. So if we bring this more into like a dark magenta, it'll both mesh better with everything on the outside. So you can see her a little better. So let's get the shading on. So it looks like their light source is coming from over here. And one of the things that I noticed about their shading is they are not capturing the dimensions of Bijuu's body as well as they could be. We're gonna assume that this Hamtaro character is built like this. If this were the case, and there was a light source coming from behind, kind of to the side, Bijuu would be casting a shadow that was more like this. So more rounded around the face, and also the head would be casting a shadow and the body would be casting a shadow. Our shadows are gonna end up looking a little bit more like this. Usually when it comes to little arms like this too, I'll just do like a little rounded segment. You could have a little bit of shadow here if you really wanted to. And then for here, because this is facing the light, you could put shadow there, but honestly it might get kind of muddied if you did. So I would just put like a little dollop of shadow there. This would be more akin to what the shadows would look like. And this creates a nice like strong object contrast on the other side. Now that you have this like region of harsh shadow and the light coming from the side, you really can have a kind of pastel-y background, because even if you have a pastel background, you have this whole segment in shadow here that will define the shape from the background itself. With that said, the shading color that she used was pretty nice, but I think the thing that I'm noticing is that it's not very different from the color of the background. So I think I'm actually going to make this a little more pinky, because then it might stand out a bit from the background. See, now she is very pink looking though. That's the only trouble. Now if I were to pick the shading color, I'd probably do more like this. The only trouble is then she becomes very flesh toned. Something that might work for this style is a lot of like old Pokemon art does this, where they have the segments that's shaded as its own like, yeah. I want to see what this looks like. Now, I think something's happening here. We're gonna have to bring some of this here, because I don't think that it's the color they use that's the problem. I think what's happening is that it's not a striking enough color in comparison to the background, and so Bijuu's kind of getting lost. Actually, maybe that was the answer all along. Maybe not more dark, but more light. I think that was it. I think that I needed to do this because then it separates the blush from that segment too. I do like this warmer outline. I think it helps define things a little better. I'm also going to make the blushy lines a little darker just so they're more visible, and going to color the outsides of the ears this pink so that they have more of a warm feeling to them, because the gray that's been used in the piece, while it gives it kind of a pastel-y look, it makes them kind of blend in and not like look as much like ears, I feel like. The bows on this side of the head, I'm gonna make more purple because they're towards this like purpley light that we've created. Now I'm gonna leave that one outlined in red because it's on the other side of the head, so it would be kind of affected by this warm environmental color, I think, that we've been using. All I did there was I airbrushed up towards the pigtail so that it looks like light is coming up from the ground towards where the hair is drooping down to. But what that does is it creates almost like this dimension of like hair that is closer to us as the viewer and hair that's closer to the ground. Now, I will do these little flowers still, I think, but I am actually going to use the foot pink to do it, because I think that it'll just make them pop a little bit more and be a little more cohesive with the rest of the piece. I kind of like that. I'll honestly leave that. I think that's cute. Just add that little pop there, because, you know, it gives more of like a light. And also the feet will be a little shinier because they're made out of like a different material, I guess. I don't know what else to call it. The reason for all of this is to show when you put these two next to each other, this bijou stands out more. The shadow colors, while not super different, they just kind of like help her stand out from the background. It is still going to be a lighter piece because it's more pastel-y, but to have these lines be like a little darker in the places that they are, it just helps it like not fade into the background as much. The only other thing that I think I could possibly do to even like give this a little more oomph is if I were to take this pink and in the areas that Bijou's being hit by the light, do this. It'll just give her like a little bit extra volume. Cool shadow and warm shadow, if that makes sense. I'd love to know more about that, like how it's cooler towards the outside. Okay, so my reasoning for doing that, right? If there is a light source and there's different kinds of light, but I assumed for this piece, because the light part of Bijou is much warmer, it's like a very cream color and the background is like this yellow. If the light is warm light, the umbra of the shadow, which is the darkest part of the shadow, is going to be a warmer color because of the light that it's coming from being very warm. And then whatever surface the light behind Bijou is hitting, that's what's creating this kind of like cooler bounce light. When you use color, this could literally just be white. Like this could be a white surface that's here that's creating this, but when you have a warm color and then you take it to a gray or light color, that actually starts to look like cold, I found, which is kind of interesting. So like this yellow, if I were to just move this yellow slightly to gray, it doesn't look super cool here, but if you did it like that, it almost gets kind of like, to me at least, a cool feeling to it. And I believe that's because when you think of like contrasting colors or like removing saturation from something, our eye wants to think that it's like the opposite of that color. That is why this bounce light, while it does look cooler, it's just that I'm trying to think of what the space behind the light source is. It's less because there's actually something cool behind Bijou, and more just because if the light source itself is warm, it's going to cast a warm shadow, and then the opposite of that, like the light that's bouncing off the surface behind her, is just going to look different, so it's going to look cooler. I guess if you wanted to have two warm light sources, you could have like a sunlight light source and then maybe have something that's reflecting like the yellow of sunlight, and that could also work. So first and foremost, one of the things that I noticed with your art, Lemmy, is I can tell that you are trying to have a direction with the light source that you are doing. I'm filling it in with the darkest color values of each area so that we can add on light rather than add on shadow. So part of the thing that I'm seeing here that might be even a little bit of a challenge is that it looks like there is a gradient to the wings. Shading with gradients, especially when you cell shade, that is really hard. I think the way that Lemmy did it is probably the best thing to do. The only thing I'm gonna do, I think, really to change anything, I'm gonna try to use the exact same colors. I just think I'm gonna try to do more pointed shading and more intense to really bring out the shapes. So one of the biggest things that I'm seeing here that's getting lost, the shape here is if you had some light on this side, like some bounce light on this side of Volcrona, I think it would kind of fill out the shape a little more and just add another layer of dimension. And the other thing is, I'm feeling like you need to bring this here and then bring that darker section up more like here to where the little bumps are, so that there is like some reflection, yeah, but we're getting the full like round shape of, I believe this is the thorax of the bug. And the other thing is, I think you, even though this is like a soft fleshier shape, you should still have a little highlight, just a tiny bit of highlight every so often. Okay, the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna crank this up a little more, and then I'm going to use that here, actually even a little more because it's coming down lower, but I'm not going to shade on this side as much because the head is covering it. Going to bring this value here, and then this probably around here, maybe even a little reflection from the eye. Like really what it is I just am making your light a little harsher, and I'm adding a bounce light to the back of your shadow. And in doing that, it's creating higher sections of contrast, but also giving a little bit of more dimension to your shapes. And there would be a little bit of shadow there. And this is also going to be hit by the light before it falls behind the head. So I do think I'm going to do, actually not on these wings, I'm not going to do like any harsh light except for maybe here and like a little bit here. But I'm actually going to focus on doing mostly bounce light here, because I think that'll kind of make things look nice. You have like all this nice depth that's coming out in the wings. And I do think we need to do a yellow gray value. I do think I do like this blue, and I do want to bring that in, I think. So what if I even took this and just brought it around so that it was almost like warmer? There we go. That's what I need to do. Because it's reflecting the horn, so it shouldn't be like shiny, it should be warmer. Now that's going to be hit by that light, so I think this actually has to kind of get filled in here. Now, what I will do is color the line art on this side, but I think this is getting closer to my vision. Yeah, that's all of it. So compared to the original, yeah, I'm feeling it. You have to remember bounce light is literally the light bouncing off of a surface that is nearby it. So this is not an across-the-board rule, because if you do this too much, your art's going to start to look like glossy, like it's going to look like it's made of plastic. However, a pretty good rule of thumb is if you have, let's take a kind of nice orangey red color. You have an orange ball. It's an orangey red ball, like I said. So this is the light. This is like the shadow area on that ball. You can grab the shadow, take a little bit of a darker color, and create your penumbra, which is the darkest part of the shadow. Usually I use an airbrush to do this. You don't have to, but it's a little easier that way. And now this bounce light, like wherever this is, you grab whatever this segment here is and you bring it over. If this was sitting on a white surface, you bring it over and you desaturate it a little bit and you lift it up towards white. It's important to keep it into like kind of a still saturated gray value, because it's going to be reflecting the ground that it sits on. You could, if this was sitting on like a gray surface or like on a white surface, your shadow would be a little bit affected by the thing that's casting it, but not entirely. So you're probably going to get like kind of this will probably get dark where it touches the ground. So basically, just as a good rule of thumb, the bounce light on any object is going to be the color of the surface that's closest to it. That's why on Volcrona's head here, the bounce light I made kind of warm orange. And the way I got that was literally by moving on the color wheel, moving the blue towards orange and then pulling it up towards gray. And it creates a warmer looking blue. Yeah, like that. Although I would even make that a little more warm. It creates a warmer looking blue that looks similar to that horn color. And that's because that horn is the closest thing to the face, so it would be reflecting the light from that horn. Originally I had it as kind of a grayer color, but I changed it because it was looking kind of plasticky when I had it like that. And that's the biggest thing you want to avoid with bounce lights, is you want to make sure that you're taking into account the things in your environment so you don't get kind of a plasticky look to things.